Are we being lied to about how much inflation really is? Groceries. I've always spent $300 per week on food for 2 adults and a toddler. We always had snacks, sodas, steak. But now it's barely enough for average meals. Car prices for used cars are up something like 30%. Rent going up 20% or more for everyone I know. Is inflation really only 7%? There's no way we're being told how much it actually is. Yay if gas is up 50%. Food 20%. Cars 20%. Rent 20%. Who cares if TVs and office supplies are up only 4 or 5%? It's all what you're buying. If what you have to buy is up 20% plus, then yay, inflation is a lot more than 7%. Inflation is higher than 7% per year. Anyone who isn't making more than 10% over what they were making in 2021 got a pay cut. I did this in a previous post. But just for reference. February 2019. Dental 120. Health. Family HSA 440. Term life 34. Vision 16. Ext. Dis 24. Total 434. February 2022. Health 880. Other lumped in separate program 250. Total 1130. That's an increase of almost $700 in 3 years. Just shy of triple in cost. Or at 170 hours worked a month. $4.12 more an hour that would need to be earned to make up for it. This doesn't even talk about everything else. Car payments, gas, food, home electric, heating, etc. That's also gone up in the last 3 years alone. My father was able to provide for a 2,400 square per foot house and an annual vacation to Disney World when I was a kid in the late 70s on a $24K factory job. New car every year. Paid for in cash too. I can only dream of that, and I make 2.5 times what he did. I work at a grocery store. Let me tell you. Basically everything goes up 20+ cents every time we change tags, which is weekly. I seen a bottle of store brand apple juice jump 50 cents one day. I always joke I can't afford to shop at the store I work at. Of course they are. They cut housing data from the CPI in the 80s. Yes. We've been lied to about that and just about everything else. It's not really inflation in the traditional sense so much as price gouging. Profits are hitting record highs, and the talk of inflation actually preceded prices being raised. But if people start sharing stories of empty shelves and complain about prices, that gives retailers the opportunity to raise profit margins. Yes. Mathematician and economist E. Weinstein has been talking about this for a while, and I studied economics in college, and the way they talk about inflation is totally fucked up and misrepresenting. They basically use a basket of goods that measures the price increase of a set number of things. Like milk or other shit like that. In economics, they measure the increase in the money supply as the long-run gauge for what inflation should be. I'm theory. The only difference between short run and long run in this respect is savings. But very few people are saving, so the real number of inflation should be much closer to that percentage increase in M2. If we use the latter model, which we should, real inflation is probably closer to 40%, maybe even over 100% over the next year or two. If you look at the Fed website, which is the Federal Reserve database. I don't know the stat at the top of my head, but basically at least half of all US dollars that exist in the world were created in the last couple of years. So yes, Long story short, you are technically being lied to about inflation. I wish the details of how this happens was talked about more, but it's not. Corporations, companies are most definitely using the pandemic, inflation and shortages as an excuse to jack up the price of nearly everything well beyond what would cover their cost increases. Most major corporations reported record profits for 2021 thanks to pandemic price gouging. Welcome to capitalism at its finest. The government pays out pensions through Social Security, if not also defined benefit pensions for retired employees, and also just employs a lot of people. The higher official inflation numbers go, the higher the indexed increases will need to be and the bigger raises employees will expect. That means they constantly fiddle with the calculation. I'm not sure how accurate, but there's some analysis floating around Reddit and the general interwebs suggesting if inflation were calculated the same way today as 40 years ago, approaching 20%, it would be higher today. Yes, I won't directly disagree that many companies and individuals looking at you scalpers are just obnoxiously price gouging at this point. But to answer your question more directly, reported inflation numbers are lies and do not reflect the true nature of how cost of living has risen in the last 40 years. Governments worldwide have incentives to report specific numbers, artificially high or low than reality, to suit their needs at a point in time. At the moment, they report lower than reality to give the illusion that they aren't suffering hyperinflation from quantitative easing in a weak overall economy, and also to make people think all is well, when in fact it is much worse than prior decades. Government economists will shift the calculation of what is in the basket for inflation purposes every year. I believe the term being used now is shadow inflation, and it's a reflection of where inflation really sits for those of us not in the 1%. Hence why so many of us feel like rent, groceries, healthcare and other costs are getting insanely expensive by the quarter. Meanwhile, wages have barely budged. Right now I think true inflation is more like 10 to 15% rather than the reported numbers that often sit between 2 to 5% depending on country. It's price gouging, with a thin veneer of inflation to give it a false legitimacy.
Yes.
I think on the food front, inflation is caused by the large corporate-owned supermarkets chains. They've had double-digit raises in almost everything. The shopping at Aldi's or Trader Joe's have noticed very few price increases outside of beef and pork. These are European-owned chain stores. I doubt anything will be done to the American corporations because they're quote-unquote too big to fail and fill the American politicians' election coffers to get what they want. We aren't being told the truth on a hell of a lot more than inflation. The Bootstrap Cook is starting to publish a new Vimes Boots Index, working with the UK Office of Stats. It aims to track the real cost of inflation, based on what people with little money are really buying, not what the inflation basket is based on. In short, yes. E.g. pasta last year was 29p, 500 grams. This year it's 70p, 500 grams, a 141% increase. I'd say real inflation is around 15 to 20%, and if you factor in housing prices it's up even more. Basically every single wage earner in North America got substantially less spending power and the really rich got way richer. Shows you where all the printed money ends up. There really is no middle class anymore. I agree. Family of 3 here, we usually spend $300 as well per week to have meals at home for 7 nights plus fun snacks. drinks and a few ice cream treats. Now $300 gets us about 4 days worth of products. We are now considering buying meat in bulk. Shopping with more focus on ads, sales. Mind you, our household income is $180K per year. It's wild. 2 working parents with 1 child are penny pinching. Moms and dads in the 90s had 1 working parents and it felt much more manageable for them. iPad is still $329 though. Inflation often doesn't affect all areas equally. Energy and gas are the absolutely biggest reasons for inflation in the US. Around 50%. And since your country is so car dependent, it affects the average worker more. Since energy costs are also baked into housing, those have gone up as well. Shelter have also gone up. But the raises you are seeing are more in the line with energy costs. Poor quality houses leak more energy than high quality. Old appliances use more energy than new. The second highest in inflation is food at home. Core inflation, without food and energy, is at about 5%. So the inflation calculations seem to be undervaluing energy costs. The food inflation might also be skewed in the type of food basket used in calculation or other methods how it could be calculated by.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.